Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Tracer Podcast. As always, here's where we have great discussions to try to help you become a better endurance athlete. And as usual, I like to tell a little story to intro my guest. Back in, I would say, maybe 2006, 2007, somewhere in there, I was working at a company, and I used to do a lot of climbing. I used to do a lot of bouldering. And boulder climbing is very technical. It's, you're not going up the mountain. You're kind of staying close to the ground. You don't rope up, but you do these really difficult climbing moves. And I was spending a fair amount of time doing this kind of climbing. And so my technical skills were pretty good. And one night in the wintertime, when all the boulders were covered in snow here in Utah, I went to the climbing gym, and I bumped into some coworkers at this climbing gym. And one of them had been climbing in Yosemite and had taken a fall and had broken his ankle. And he was in a big boot and not moving very well on his feet. And I said, hi, nice to meet you, that kind of stuff. Talked to some of my other coworkers. And I started up on what was, for me, a really difficult climb. And keep in mind that I had been doing a lot of bouldering, so the technical moves in climbing were not much for me. Like I was pretty strong climber at the time. And I was up there struggling on this hard route, kind of hanging on the rope, working my way up this route, when this coworker who had the broken foot kind of came flying by me on the wall. And he had his foot just hanging off. He wasn't using the foot that was broken, that was in his boot. And not only that, it was a full grade harder on the route that he was climbing versus the one that I was climbing. And I didn't know it at the time, but this person turned out to be somebody who has elite talent. He's known well around the world for many things. First and foremost, he is the king of the Barkley Marathons. He has dozens and dozens of ultramarathons under his belt, including top 10s at Hardrock 100, Wasatch 100, Bear 100, many more. Go check him out on Ultra Sign Up. He's a brilliant engineer. He's a creator of many iconic routes in the Wasatch, including the Wasatch Ultimate Ridge Link Up, the Whirl, where I'm kind of hoping Killian will come give that a try. He was putting something out on social media saying he was looking for ideas, and me and others put the Whirl down as a challenge to Killian. So maybe he'll show up in Salt Lake and do that with us. And he's also the director of the now very popular Running Up for Air races. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Jared Campbell.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the introduction there. And I hadn't really thought about that story, so thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, lots
Yeah,
of time spent
you,
in a boot and otherwise in a gym when I was broken in some fashion. You can always figure out some way to have fun still.
absolutely. Do you remember blowing by me on the route that night?
I don't remember that,
Of
but I
course you
remember
don't.
climbing a lot with a
Of,
boot. Yeah.
yeah, of course you don't remember because it was no big deal to you. That was normal. Yeah. Jared, let's get to know you a little bit before we dive into some of the things that make you an amazing runner. How did you get into climbing and mountain sports and long races in the mountains?
Yeah, I mean, for me it's been like an evolution for sure. I guess not to go too far into the past, but backing up to when I was a kid, I mean, I always did a lot of stuff outside. At about 13, 14 years old, I had a cousin who took me to a climbing gym, probably the same climbing gym you were referring to.
Mm-hmm.
And
Raw creation, right?
it was Rock Creation, yeah.
Yeah,
Boy, I
yeah,
love that place. Yeah, that was pretty defining for me at that
yeah.
age. I couldn't drive, but something about that sport really just connected with me because I've never been into the big, massive team sport kind of thing, but and climbing is this thing that's, there's a team and social aspect of it for sure, especially if you're doing rope climbing. The person on the other end of the rope is part of your team for sure. But it's a you're in your head. It's an amazing sport where you have to both challenge kind of the physical evolution and getting stronger and more talented and movement and all that stuff, but equal parts mindset as well. And I loved it. And Yeah, so I got into it at that age, and I thankfully had a lot of friends and mentors that were older than me that could drive. So while most kids were doing whatever they do at junior high and high school, I was, the minute I was done with sort of the academic side of school, um, which I really did like. I love the academic side of school, but once I was done with that, I was like in a car driving to some cool climbing destination within a, 6, 8 hour radius of Salt Lake City, or I was flying somewhere to some place I'd seen in a magazine, some beautiful cliff with some amazing climbing somewhere in the world. And so that's how I spent that part of my life, was sort of dreaming and seeing inspiring things. And then having that thing that lures you in, I was always, everything was based around having that, some destination, some objective. And to do that in your teens and, all the way into your 20s and up, was really amazing. And, yeah, so I kind of started bouldering and on ropes and top roping and lead climbing, eventually big wall climbing and ice climbing. And as that progression takes you into the mountains further and maybe more remote stuff, eventually I was sort of zooming out, let's say, and seeing big peaks on a map and saying, well, how could I do that one and that one and that one? And that was an amazing, fun stage. So it was like a lot of the skill that I had developed over years as a climber, but it sort of naturally pulls you into this aerobic athletic side of things for sure. If you're doing going up peaks and trying to do it fast and at high altitude. And then in my early 20s, I was working for a professor in a lab who was training for a 100-mile race, which I thought sounded
Mm.
horrible. And in fact, I even told him, I'm like, that just sounds horrible. Why would you want to do that? I would never want to do that. But then that later that day, I was like really intrigued by how much sort of rejection I had given to that idea. And as I thought about it, I'm like, it's not too much different. At the time, I was doing like the Grand Traverse in the Tetons. It's a link
Hmm.
up of peaks. And, I was like, well, time-wise, I mean, it's probably a little bit longer, but,
Hmm.
similar effort. You're breathing, you're trying to move efficiently, you're in the mountains. And so let's give it a try. So that's kind of how I jumped into ultra running, and really specifically through the lens of like kind of harder mountainous races, just because my background was in the mountains. I was never like a runner, so I always from day one really gravitated to the more interesting races, let's say.
Well, breaking news here on the Tracer podcast. Jared Campbell announces that 100 miles once sounded miserable to him. That's kind of an
Absolutely.
ironic thing, right? But yeah, that it makes a lot of sense though as a climber, because yeah, climbing is a ultra marathon of its own, right? And so a lot of the challenges that we face climbing a big mountain are very similar to an event, to a 100-mile journey across a trail, and makes a lot of sense. What strikes me when I think back to that time I saw you in the bouldering gym at Rock Creation, and for those of you who don't know what Rock Creation is, it was one of the first climbing gyms, at least in Salt Lake City, and I think Black Diamond put it together. Black Diamond has a campus where they did a lot of their manufacturing and had some offices, and they're all climbers over at Black Diamond. And so this is especially the case back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s. And so they put together a little climbing gym that was kind of an annex to their factory there, and put up
Yep.
some walls and bolted some holds on it. And it became a meeting spot and a hangout. It was a club. It was fun. My dad used to take me there, and I had the same wonder when I first walked in there, like, wow, look at this place, indoor climbing. And yeah, what a special place. When I think back on that time that I saw you, when you blew by me on your 512D or whatever you were doing on one foot, um, it strikes me that not only did you have this knack for extremely technical climbing, which is a physical skill. Of course, it's mental as well. You've alluded to that. But then you've gone on to be able to apply that mental skill to endurance, where you have to hold a pace for a really long time. And cardiovascularly taxing, it's metabolically taxing. And what I'm really excited to dig into your head about is how much of that success that you found in something very technical and something very kind of, I'm going to call it brute force, like brute endurance, how much of that really stems from your mindset versus maybe what I would call your DNA? Because I think a lot of us, in running, in sports, it's really easy to dismiss yourself and be like, look, I'm not Jared Campbell, dude. I can't do that. You know what I mean? And or I'm not a that speed guy, that I just wasn't born with those genetics. And so we somewhat dismiss ourselves and limit ourselves by saying, well, I wasn't born with that kind of DNA, so I'm always going to hit my ceiling pretty low. But what's curious to me and what I'm getting at here is, are our ceilings low because we put a regulator on them within our own heads? And when we take that off, does it open the door for us to truly excel? And the reason I'm thinking about that with you is that you are such a good technical climber, but then you're so good at these really long efforts too. And so what's the common thing there? Is it could be your DNA. You could just be gifted or in your DNA to be a great endurance athlete and a great climber as well, and it kind of comes easy for you. That's a possibility. But something tells me there's a lot to be learned from your brain, and what you're showing the world can be done with your brain. What are your thoughts about that?
A great question, and an awesome topic. One I think a lot about. One I love to talk to people about, especially young kids who might be, getting into sport and having those thoughts like you just mentioned. And maybe I can't do it because of X, Y, or Z. Um, maybe more so than most runners and athletes out there. I definitely uh, think so much of our success lies between our two ears and how we think and how we approach things. Whether you're a climber, whether you're into ultra running, and most things in life, to be quite frank, um, stem back to how our minds work and how we approach things. As a climber, for me, again, I just feel really fortunate to have gotten into that sport at a young age for so many reasons. But I think hugely the mindset side of it. And what I didn't mention when I was talking about my climbing past is I had a phase too. Climbing is all about, it teaches you, there is a fear component for almost everyone. And you also learn really quickly that fear literally it's not going to help you. Yeah, you have to logic your way into, you know, if you do it the right way, climbing can be very safe, right? If you're doing rope climbing, sport climbing, whatever, like, and you understand the gear and the physics of it, you go, yeah, this is really safe. And so as long as I climb in this capacity, like it should be very safe. And if I've convinced myself it's safe, then there's no reason to be fearful of it. Now, it's easy to say that, but it's harder to
Mm-hmm.
actually eradicate fear from your mind and truly climb. But I have to admit, whatever technique you might use to get to that point, to try to minimize it and swish down that fear component to near zero, you approach like this sort of euphoric, in the zone, if you will, like mindset where it's so amazing. And it's sort of like so amazing because you're sort of in control of this thing that is very human, emotions and fear and all this, but like to be able to control it is like such a fun part of the challenge for sure. And I have two young daughters who both are climbing, and one of them's really into climbing. She's 11 years old, and what's so fun is she has all the skill in the world. And at this point, her becoming the greatest climber in the world is, purely a function of her mind, in my opinion, and how she and I think she's really good. And as a parent, I try to help give her these tools to sort of be confident and overcome it. And but climbing is so cool. And so growing up that way, at a young age, I learned so many skills there. I had a phase, a lengthy phase where I did a lot of free soloing as well, not necessarily condoning or encouraging people to go do that. But the frame of mind tied to that is really, really interesting. And I have to admit, it's, again, different stage in my life at this point, but that is like everything I just described about how do I eliminate fear so that I can climb the best. Well, when you're free soloing, you take that like an order of magnitude or several more up in terms of like the importance of truly having no fear, because the consequence got dramatically higher because you're probably going to die if you fall, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, having a phase where I was really attached to that mindset, I think, and the way you feel when you're in control, um, was amazing. And I think that stage is when I sort of started to get into running. And it turns out that running, all of that mental mindset component ports perfectly to big, hard, scary runs, because so many people are overcome by some fear that limits them into holding them back, creates these perceived limits for sure. I mean, ultra marathons for sure is like all about some limit that someone, either you set, most likely you've set for yourself or society set it up for you. And it's so fun to take that mindset of really deciding where to put your mental energy and also push that aside and just say, I'm going to go do my thing from a running
Yeah.
perspective. So I think there's a total parallels between the two. And I think for sure it really helped me to be a climber and bring that to ultra running and just knowing, okay, just like climbing or free soloing, like fear is going to not help me at all. And I have the tools to know how to squish that down, push it aside, and just be calm and focus on the act of running.
Absolutely. I
I
can
can,
totally relate to that. Like, there's been times when I've been climbing, earlier in my life when I used to do it more that, you get up on something and there's times when fear has completely overtaken me and you start getting that sewing machine leg and everything tenses up and you overgrip and next thing you know, you're falling. Versus other times when, just like you've said, uh, you learn to actually calm it and to soothe it in a way and turn that into, I'm going to make a move here, and you make the move and you climb up it and you conquer it, and it's exhilarating, right? Because it's like, I just did that really hard climbing move where it was completely scary and the fear didn't shut me down. I overcame my fear. And that's, I think, where it's the same as ultra marathons, right? Like, we got these scary courses in front of us and we see ourselves coming across the finish line knowing what we had to battle within our own heads. And I think that's a big part of what drives people to do these weird
yeah.
races that we do.
Yeah, I think so. And I think all of us, I think too, the older I get too, I feel like I learned a lot of those fundamentals of emotional and physical and mental control through climbing. I was able to take that to running, but I think also to other aspects of your life. So, um, I really think these things we're talking about, they port to everything in life. It's really like if you step back far enough, it's how we as humans sort of manage and handle anxiety and fear with anything. It could be fear of, starting a new job, fear of starting a
Mm-hmm.
company, fear of, whatever, making that change in your life. And so, I know the podcast is going to be about running and a little bit about climbing, but I hope that a lot of the things we discuss, are useful to people in all aspects of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's zoom into that a little bit. Let's first talk about the running aspect, and then we can draw some analogies on how it applies in everyday life, because we're all human beings trying to learn and grow and do better and be stronger. Let's say that give us an example of a time when you're in the Barkley Marathons or you're on 100 miler and things aren't going so well. And you have and you start to experience, I think almost everybody listening this can think of a time in their lives when they were in a race, when it started not going as planned, and that anxiety or that fear starts knocking on the door. What's a time when that's happened to you, and what conscious effort can you give it to clamp it in your way, in your words.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so to use a Barkley example, and Barkley is such a interesting event for a lot of reasons. I've been out there quite a few times over the years, so I've really come to appreciate what it is and what it isn't. But like the event as a whole, and the whole process of, trying to get into it, and once you're in, understanding it and training for it, and all the way to arriving in camp. And then for those who've studied it, you once you get there, like you have a general idea. You like know the day it's going to start, but you don't know what time,
Hmm.
and you don't know the course until the day before. And so if you don't like uncertainty, and you are the type of person who needs to have everything laid out and in, just perfectly, if I follow this recipe, success will follow. If that's your mindset, the Barkley is not for you
Hmm.
because it is intentionally many aspects of it created to be this, experience where you're tested on how you handle like uncertainty and unknown and those unknowns. So, okay, I'll zoom in to try to answer your question. One aspect of the race that I always find fascinating. The evening before the race, you show up in camp and the map is rolled out. I think that's pretty well documented. So the course
Hmm.
is like revealed the evening before. So you don't have a lot of time. And how do you go? What do you do with that information? And I love watching, like just sort of stepping back and like observing how the 40-ish people that are there sort of like handle this. And there's a lot of anxiety, even though these are people who I think are generally really good at controlling uncertainty. They're still like moths to a flame, like all these people hovering around and like really closely trying to transcribe what they see on the map over to the map that they hopefully have.
Hmm.
And then they run back and they go, and then you're in this like, okay, what do I do with that information? And a lot of nervousness, like incredible amounts of like nervousness around camp. And then the next thing is, well, I don't know what time the race is going to start. I think it starts sometime between midnight and noon, right? There's a 12-hour window. And, this is yet another fascinating Barclayism. And what I find so interesting is always people are around camp. It's a small camp. It's a little tiny picnic area. Well, it's a camp, but it's a small one. And everyone's buzzing around and they come over and they think because I've been there that I must have some, knowledge that they don't. What time do you think, Jared, that it's going to start? I think because it's a three-quarter phase moon and it rained 3 days ago and, the election results were the following and the astronomical alignment of the stars are X, that because of that, it's going to start at, 2 to 3 a.m. What do you think? And they really like want to hear my opinion.
Hmm.
I'm trying to be a little like funny about this because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is funny. This
yeah.
is like truly something that you cannot control, the start time.
Right.
And so right there, we the people who are going to run the race are presented with this opportunity to see what we do with something completely out of our control. And and I just have to laugh at that. And I get asked that, a handful of times by people around the camp, what time do you think it's going to start, Jake? What time do you prefer it? Do you like it when it's earlier? Do you like it when it's later? Because you're in Mountain Standard Time, do you do this? And I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
Like none of that matters. Like I truly don't have a preference. If it starts at midnight, cool. And here's some good ways you could interpret that if the race chooses to start at midnight. If it starts at this time, here's the positive way that you could look at that. If it starts later in the day, try to find some positive interpretation of whatever reality serves us up tomorrow morning.
Hmm.
Because the act of having a preference means that when it's not that, because it will never be exactly what you predict, chances are near zero. When it's something different, right there, you set yourself up for like a psychological disadvantage because it wasn't what you wanted. It wasn't what you preferred. Oh my gosh, I wanted it at 6 a.m. and it started at 10. Oh crap. And so you're starting the race like step back, it's like an extra rock in your backpack
Hmm.
psychologically. And so I think I'm really I've been really interested in that race just because I like trying to filter out and bucketize what are the things I can control, what are the things I can't, like the start time, and then really putting time and energy where it matters, where you can control, and truly having no preference, no emotions, no response, no anything about the things out of my control. And I
Mm.
think that kind of is like, if I get philosophical about the Barkley, that's kind of what Barkley is all about, is how do you handle um, and separate out the controllable from the uncontrollable.
We just watched the Hardrock 100 unfold and watched 49-year-old Ludo uh, set the record last year. And did he set it again this year or just win by 3 hours? Either way, amazing, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Crushed everybody by 3 hours. Amazing. And when you listen to some of his interviews, I hear some similarities to what you're saying. He didn't seem to be too worked up about what was going to happen. He
Mhm.
didn't seem to have too much of a plan other than he prepared. He definitely prepared. I mean, he went to Silverton and ran that course like 2 times over by the time he was on the race course for the day of the race.
Right.
So he definitely put in the prep. But in listening to some of the interviews and just listening to his demeanor, just kind of reading his demeanor, it was very much what you're saying, where it was like, whatever happens is going to happen and I'm cool with it, and just took that load off. He doesn't, he didn't seem like he was out there, had to win. And yeah, that seems like a beautiful way to not only run a race, but a beautiful way to live life. Um, there's a page in Training for the Uphill Athlete, a book that I love by Steve House and Scott Johnston and Killian Jornet, that has a page that you wrote. And the title of that page is Reframing Adversity. And you talk a little bit about this, like when bad things happen, how do you shift your mindset to almost preferring that? And I've heard that also in another book called the Power of Now. I forgot who the author is, but it's a book about staying present in the moment. But that's so easy to say, like, okay, something terrible happens to me, and I'm gonna just reframe it as like, oh, good, I'm glad. In Training for the Uphill Athlete, you talk about being out on a trail when the weather just comes down. You get caught in a
Yeah.
major rainstorm and you're just getting clobbered by the rain, and you tell yourself, great, this is perfect. Like, great training for Barkley coming up. Let's go.
Yeah.
Step in a cactus. Oh, perfect. That just makes it harder, and now I'm going to be even better. So, like, this idea of reframing. But the question I have for you is, like, tangibly, what's a takeaway that somebody listening to this who's not good at this? I don't know if I mean, I'm probably pretty bad at this myself. Something goes wrong. What do we do? Like, what's a conscious decision and choice we can make, or an action or a behavior that we can take to reframe that adversity and actually start to change our brains so that we're not just on autopilot and just going by the mercy of our, kind of reptilian reactions to everything.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I had a fun time writing that article.
Mhm.
And I think ultra marathons, because they're so long, 100 miles is long, whether you're Ludo or whether at the front of the pack or the back of the pack, it's long. So inevitably things are going to go wrong, right? And so I guess the kind of root of that article for me is that training, part of what's been very helpful for me is seeking that out. To your point, intentionally, not just being okay with when things go bad or wrong or whatever, but like seeking it out as itself a form of training. I mean, it's really easy to put together a training regiment that's, run X miles, or, look up how to prep for a marathon, or hopefully listeners sign up for a tracer and have coaching through that
Thanks
capacity.
for the plug. Thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah. Sign up for
But
Tracer today. I didn't
for a
pay him to
limited
say that,
time.
folks. I didn't tell him to say that. Yep.
Um, but anyway, I guess my point is, beyond sort of the first order way, the simple way to look at training, miles, vertical, et cetera, time on feet. These are like really easy metrics. But as we start to do harder and harder things, if you ran the 5K around your neighborhood, it probably can and should be that simple to build up to it and run the 5K and, call it a day. But when you do something that takes half a day, 2 days, like bad stuff's going to happen.
Hmm.
Something will go wrong. Many things will go wrong. And when you see it that way, I think that's why ultra running and is so good for all of us is once you realize that the less than perfect scenario is part of the experience, a smart person should say, how can I prepare for that? Right? Just like we want to be able to run fast enough and hike enough and whatever. I want my knees to handle the downhills. Once you go, part of the experience is when stuff goes wrong, then, you know, hopefully one should say, well, what can I do to prepare for that? And what's really fun is when you say, cool, maybe I could just take that to the other aspects of my life. And when something goes wrong, um, choose to see that as an opportunity to prepare for adversity. You know what I mean? So I
Absolutely.
guess
Yeah.
to someone who might never sign up for something that's really hard, maybe it's difficult to explain this, but let's just assume most of your audience is, they have some goal, some objective. Hopefully it's a big, hard, scary ultramarathon. Um, and then, in your process of doing them and learning, you go, dang, I got to get better at handling the stuff that goes wrong. Um, and that'll help me make a better runner. It truly does. I would bet all that your top runners have built that up, whether they consciously thought about it or not. They became good at ultimately just handling whatever's thrown at them, right? Whether it's a
Yeah.
physical thing, the weather, the trail, an aid station that was missing, I don't know, whatever. And and I love that. And so in the running sense, I see it as something that's part of it. It's a part of the experience. Do I want to get better? Yes. Okay. Now, if I want to get better, I want to work on that mentally. And then for me in the early Barkley days, I just knew there were all these crazy, horrible things that happened, including the weather. And I was training, and I'm like, I don't want to just log miles. I want to go after that experience. When there's a winter storm warning coming through Salt Lake City, and it's like record storm, I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm intentionally going to go
Yeah.
run during that, and it
Yeah.
just sort of like spread out in my life to when something crazy would happen, getting a flat tire in a rainstorm on your way to work and you got to change it on the highway and you're getting soaked in your suit. You're like, okay, this is an opportunity. And so, like, such a fun thing to seek that out and literally become good at, just like you become good at running fast, you become skilled at, maintaining composure when stuff goes wrong. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of the root of that article because I knew everybody else would focus on running fast and all these other, physical training techniques. And yet the mental thing, I would argue, is massive. It's huge
Yeah.
and a little bit harder to describe and talk to and give tips on how to get better at it. But it's hopefully my description there was helpful. Just seeing it as
Yeah.
something you consciously want to get better at. Therefore, step one is okay, when that thing happens, it's an opportunity for me to deal with this. And then eventually you go, "Oh, well, I want to intentionally seek that out."
Right.
And then you're really going to get good at handling it.
I want to take a quick moment and tell you about a product that I think will help you nail your next marathon or ultra marathon. To do well in these events, you have to train correctly. You have to know how to build your endurance, how to build your strength, how to build your speed, your economy. And it's not always obvious how to do that. So, what better way to train than to receive daily workout recommendations from people who are winning these races? These are the pros that have been there and done that and have dedicated their lives to understanding how to make the most of your training. That's what Tracer is. Tracer is a new system that brings adaptive, personalized workout recommendations to you through a mobile and web app on a daily basis for a fraction of the cost of traditional one-on-one coaching. So check that out. You can see more. You can learn more about how that works at tracerfitness.com. There's a free 14-day trial, so there's really no risk. You can go in there and play around with the system and decide if it's for you. I personally have used Tracer for preparing for a 50 miler last year, my first 100 miler this last fall, and recently a ski mountaineering race. And in all three of those events, I exceeded the goals that I had for myself and did extremely well. So check it out, tracerfitness.com. Yeah, and I think one of the beauties of the sport that we do, it is a weird sport. I tell that, when people ask why I love this stuff, it's hard to answer sometimes because we do put ourselves in physical suffering quite a bit, even mental suffering quite a bit. But if I look at myself, when I first started long distance running, once those carbs were out of my brain and I was, I didn't know how to refuel or anything. And, I was in over my head and I had 6 miles back to the car. It was nothing but like gnashing of teeth to get back to the car. Like in my own brain, whether it was vocal or not, probably was vocal. My friends, probably heard me moan about it, but it was just tension and anxiety and angst. And as I've done the sport as an amateur for now over a decade, I don't have as much of that anymore. And it's a calmer form of suffering, and it's more accepting of the circumstances, and it's not a panic. It hurts. There are times when I get out on a run and maybe don't hydrate well, or something goes off with nutrition or whatever, or I'm not in shape and I'm in over my head, whatever it is. But there's an acceptance. And I think one of the beauties of our sport is that the sport itself is teaching us to do what you're explaining and you're articulating.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think as we evolve, people evolve and become calmer. I mean, I've felt that myself, and I watch other runners who, in the early days, especially if they're really competitive, lots of stress and jitters the morning of, and eventually you really do calm down. One thing I think about too is really just getting to a point where you just start to see it as something to be really grateful for too. Um, maybe that takes age and experience, and the older you get, the more you see things in life where, maybe you lost someone, or, I had a dear friend who had a really crazy sort of, you know, cancer
Mm,
experience in life, and he bounced out of it, and he's doing great now. But to
mm,
get to see that, and I try to run with him at least once a week, and he's probably one of my favorite people to run with because he appreciates every step he gets to take on this earth. And for me, it's really grounding, and like just to see that. And so, yeah, I mean, so when you feel nervous or you're gutting it out, or I mean, I've been on all fours vomiting more times than I probably care to admit. But
mm.
even in those moments, you just feel you can feel so low. I think you get to a point where even in that moment, coming out both ends, you know, 18 hours into your run, whatever, you want to die. I think you get to some point too where you can still laugh and you can still smile and say, "This is amazing," you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so lucky to get to go do this. I personally love that. And it's actually fun to see people really who've done a lot of races, they're really experienced, right? To see them be able to just like almost vomit and then just start running again.
Right.
And a lot of that comes with just, experience and confidence and real humility about the sport, and being humble and grateful for what we have to do, or get to do, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give to somebody who is in the middle of a race? Things start to come off the rails, or maybe it's not even coming off the rails, but they're running into a low point. And what's something just so like let's pretend you're their coach and you're sitting at the aid station, and there they come in, and they're at mile 70, right? And it's getting dark, or it's already been dark for hours, whatever, depending on the
Mhm.
race. And it's really tough. What are you going to tell that person?
Well, it kind of depends what they've done in the past. If they've DNF'd something in the past, which I think is good for everyone, you got to have a good DNF.
Mm.
And the reason is most likely, unless something catastrophic happens, you break your leg or something, like everyone's got to go through that at least once. And because almost always the next day, 2 days later, you go, crap, I feel pretty good.
Mm.
And it's a lesson that you have to learn. I mean, maybe a coach could help you never have that DNF, but if you do have that DNF, the good thing about it is you can learn a lot from it. And then when you're back in that situation at that extreme low and you feel like it's the end of the world, unless you're at the very back and chasing cutoffs, you know, take a little bit of time. Put your ego on the shelf for a minute. A lot of people will catastrophize the scenario they're in, likely because they've fallen off of the expectations they had.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Or they had their
Yeah.
splits. Splits are good, have some plan, but they can be dangerous too because if you fall off them for some bizarre, for
Yeah.
some reason, any number of reasons, it can just help facilitate that avalanche of your mind, and you go, "Oh my gosh, this guy's falling." I
Hmm.
can't eat. I haven't eaten for 3 hours. I got a blister. Whatever. You can totally create this scenario where it just makes sense to drop. And so if
Hmm.
I'm the coach in that scenario, I'm just going to do everything I can to help that person push aside whatever they thought their objectives were coming into the
Hmm.
race, top 10, podium, whatever. Push that aside. You put so much into being here, lots of training and travel and whatever. Let's just go walk it out. Let's delay that decision to drop until the next aid station.
Hmm.
Let's just go walk to there. Let's go have a hike in the night by
Hmm.
moonlight and, try to help them again, sort of alter their expectation, be appreciative for being there, and just go walk it off. Maybe take a bit of time in the aid station, but just keep going. And it's amazing the number of times that there's a turnaround too that occurs after that, right? So maybe you death march for an AIDS 5, 10, 20 miles, whatever, but there's also these miraculous comebacks that are so fun in this sport. And the stories at the end and the things you learn when you went, oh my gosh, I was going to die at mile 60,
Hmm.
but my mile 90, I'm eating sausage and bacon and I'm, doing 5-minute miles or something. I love these bizarre stories of the turnaround. And
Yeah.
again, sometimes you need that drop, need that DNF, you need that experience where you came back from the dead and you felt amazing. And all of those you can sort of like put them in the bank, put them in the tool chest, if you will, that you can come back to later and say, yeah, I can get through this. And so I don't think anyone's going to get it right out of the gates, their first 100 or 500s or whatever. Uh, but there's a lot that can be done. But that would be my thing is let's just walk it out. Let's lower the expectations and chill and walk and let's eat while we walk and talk and get out of the aid station and delay that decision.
Yeah. As a fellow engineer, maybe you can appreciate this, but my brain. You mentioned something there in that comment around when we DNF or when we have, even if it's not DNF, when we have really bad training runs. You can just go out and have an expectation that you're going to rip this training run, and turns out you don't. Right? Turns out something's off or whatever. Those are the moments when you really do learn the most. And so if you can reframe the failure into, oh, I'm discovering something, I'm paying the price of cracking this new piece of knowledge open. Specifically, I remember last summer went out for a run and it was really hot, and just the meltdown that my body went through because of the heat. And it wasn't any secret, like I kind of knew what was happening. But when you go experience that and you really connect your neurons, right? You really say, like, oh, this is what it feels like right now to overheat. I kind of got in this mode when it happened last year where it was like all my fitness is like, it's funny what my brain will do, and most of our brains will do, where it'll be like, everything has crashed in like 2 days, right? Because it was hot and you went out and, maybe your electrolytes get out of balance for a couple of days or something, but your fitness really hasn't decayed. And, I've learned so much on that run, and it was one of the worst runs I've ever had. It was like, I was walking downhill for so much of it. It was slow. It was miserable. And the next day I went out and had this, like, it was raining, so it was cold, and my body was like, oh, we're ready to roll today. Cause like all of that, just even a couple days of heat training was paying
Yeah.
off, and I felt great. But it was such a great learning experience. And that's just kind of echoing what you're saying, that those failure points, those bad days are really an opportunity if you reframe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have tons of runs where I feel I feel off or slow or bad or whatever. The other good way to look at that is, by having the low moments, they make you really suddenly when you have that run where things click, it just feels amazing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you need that contrast
Yeah.
in training and in life, right? You need the low moments to appreciate the high moments for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think for me, as a life gets increasingly complex too, I would say, I mean, I have to admit, a lot higher percentage of my runs don't feel as great as they used to 10 years ago. But the same, and if I dwelled on that, I could see that in a negative light. But I also have enough years behind me now to know as long as I keep getting out there, I do these, putting it in the bank, so to speak. And then, like you say, once, the next week you'll have an amazing run, and it all feels great. So, yeah, a lot of it's about reframing. I completely agree.
Yeah. Would you say that this would be a major? I mean, I'm going back to the book, the Training for the Uphill Athlete book, where you're they call you up, they say, hey, we're featuring certain athletes in this book, and you get to write whatever you want. And out of
Mhm.
all the things you could have written, reframing adversity is the title. Would you say that that is your number one tip for all of us to go be more successful in the things that we're pursuing? And let's make it tangible here. People are listening because they want to get faster. They want to get better at their sport. And of course, there's the byproduct of making their lives better as well. But to get better at running and endurance and go do better on their ultra marathons and whatever they're pursuing, is this your number one tip? Is this Jared Campbell's secret sauce?
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I guess when they did reach out about that, I knew the caliber of and the experience of the authors that were writing in, and, how much people put into the kind of mechanics of training and preparation. Again, I think it's sort of easier to quantify and easier to put in a spreadsheet and easier to be quantitative about it. And yet, I think likely the biggest differentiator between success and not is this a little bit less tangible, softer side of things, the emotional side, the human side of it. It's hugely important. I think it's been a very important thing for me. Um, and the fun thing about the article too, again, is I just think that a lot of I think it applies to running. It happens to apply very well to ultra running. But the fun thing is the topic also applies to, the rest of our lives as well. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I've gravitated to the Barclays of the world and other bizarre projects that are similar to it, where this component matters more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So,
I
so
think
one,
the bigger, the harder, the scarier. Maybe not scarier, but the bigger, the harder, the more challenging. Yeah, probably in the scarier too. The more this matters, and that's what I've always gravitated to is those types of projects. So yeah, it's something that's at the root of what I do, and maybe the advice I'd give people.
so one thing that's a little bit of maybe a duality here about you is you're an engineer. You're a mechanical engineer. I'm an engineer, and usually engineers, we love our spreadsheets. We love looking at the race. We look at the course profile, and it's like I'm doing an analysis on the histogram of the slope angle of the Bear 100, right? And
Totally.
like totally like, okay, like here's my efficiency on this grade, and here's my efficiency on this grade, and that means I should be able to do this, and I'm going to take exactly this much sodium with my water, and I'm going to take exactly this many carbohydrate grams per hour. Engineers are always in pursuit of a plan and a direct control over cause and effect. Do you still do that, or is that maybe something that's maybe Yeah. How does that play out in
Hmm.
Jared's racing and training?
Yeah, no, it's great. And you're right. I've been accused many times of being like overly analytical of things for sure,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's the nature of kind of having that engineering scientific mindset for sure. But I guess your question, has that changed over time? Yes, well, for sure it has, because I've sort of, it's almost like a sensitivity analysis, to be a little technical here for a minute. But you
Okay.
start to, let's say your first race, you're thinking about all these things: the right shoes, the right food, the water, the salt intake per unit kilogram, per unit mass, whatever, whatever. You got a 500 variables, and when you're doing your very first one, you don't quite know yet which ones matter and which ones don't. And over time, I feel like all of the noise settles out and the signals, and what really matters is the area that you end up focusing on, right? Um, and I love spreadsheets. I
Right.
love data for
Right.
sure. And I'm still, when I'm planning out things for sure, quite analytical about it. But I think for sure, if there's one thing that happens to you over 10, 20 years of doing projects like this, you really learn where your time and effort matters and where it doesn't. And um, so I'm still I'm calculated about things, but I definitely don't. I probably do way less than I did years ago in terms of focus and attention on some of these um, sort of more quantitative aspects of it, because I know I can make them work. I know it doesn't matter to me that I have the right, electrolyte intake. I know if I just eat these types of things, I'm going to get the salt and the potassium that I need, and I don't need to worry about it. So, you know, other people might completely obsess over that. And um, I've learned over time what matters for me and what doesn't.
Yeah, and maybe that's something to be, to take away from this discussion is that maybe there's a 1-2 punch there. There is wisdom in planning. There is wisdom in the spreadsheet. There is wisdom in knowing the course profile and analyzing everything and putting all of that information in your brain. But it's when we hold on too tight to that information and those expectations that
Yeah.
information brings us. I've had conversations with a good friend of mine about this recently, where I'm the same way. I'm very analytical, and so I love the sport for kind of the challenge it is to the mechanics of it, just the metabolic mechanics of trail running. Like, that's amazing to me. And what do you have control, and how do the carbs and the sodium and the water, all of that is a cause and effect that will put your body into a better position to succeed. But it can't, every sword has two sides to it, right? Two edges. And it can also be the thing that gives me the anxiety, right? When I
Yeah,
hold on too tight.
completely.
Yeah. But
I see that a lot, actually. I think especially as there's so much data in front of us now, like it's really fun to the data scientist mindset for sure. But it can become, yeah, the other side of the sword. It can be the thing that causes the anxiety, right?
yeah.
Oh my gosh, at the end of the day, my watch says X or Y, or you're tired, or you're this, or you're that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it might be worth paying attention to all of that, but it also might not be. And I think the longer you do it, you sort of, you calibrate your intuition with maybe the data. And then you can learn to just trust how you feel and trust your
Yes.
intuition and trust your water intake and your caloric intake.
Yeah.
But, the natural starting point, I think, is to give a lot of attention, do a lot of study, do a lot of research, do a lot of experimenting. And eventually you calibrate your intuitions to it. And that's a fun stage to be at, right? Where you can just plop down where, like, I mean, I've almost even had fun with it over the years. Like, I want to start here and get to there and intentionally not have all of the things that you'd ideally have and see how it goes. See, how do I compensate for that? How do I handle it? How long can I go when I don't have that? Let's say I run out of water, right? Like, I mean, I had a, I've done this in climbing and running for sure. Like, again, back to the intentionally creating a bit of adversity, like knowing I've experimented with everything, like running at night without a headlamp, like intentionally. If 5 hour run by
Hmm.
moonlight, can I actually see?
Hmm.
Can I will my vision get better at night enough to where I can run efficiently and not trip? What happens when I run out of water? I'm going to do a deprivation run where I have no calories and just see what happens. I want to feel that total bonk, like I'm going to die bonk, so that when it happens, I can handle it. And I think when you feel like it's such a science that I'm going to get everything perfect, again, when one of those things is off, your partner doesn't meet you at the aid station, and therefore you don't have your
Mm.
favorite, whatever electrolyte, or the spring isn't running that you fully counted on, and therefore I'm going to be completely dehydrated for the next 3 hours, or my headlamp battery dies because I left it on in my pack. And if the pursuit of absolute perfection there can really work against you again, because when one of those things doesn't work out, if you have no tools in your quiver and you can't handle it at all, the only option is to just drop out, call a helicopter. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know. So
Yeah.
I think the data, so many people get over analytical in today's world where we've all got immense amount of metrics and data coming at us. It can paralyze some people.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. I think we're really honing in on something really valuable to our listeners and to me as I listen to this, that yes, the data, all the tools, all the planning, all the spreadsheets, they're going to help you until you hold on too tight. And then there's also I have some friends who are better runners than me, but they don't do any of that. They don't want to. They don't want to be bothered by anything analytical. And that hurts them because they get hyponatremia because they're not paying any attention to, your body is a machine.
Yeah.
If you take a car and you take all the coolant out of it and you take the oil out of it and run it for 50 miles, chances are it's going to be pulled over on the side, completely broken and overheated, right?
Yeah.
And our bodies are machines. Our bodies are mechanical things that take chemistry and physics to move well. And so there is a beauty in the data and the analytics. But to your point, you can get almost like a sensor panic, false alarms going off all the time because one needle moved, 20% up, and you kind of panic. And then that leads to a cascade of
Yep.
mental, meltdowns. So I think what you're pointing out here is the wisdom in controlling both of those, right? Really being
Yeah.
dual, like being wise and learning and being a student and planning. And then at the same time, yeah, don't be so hung up on everything that you can't take a little dent to the side of the car without completely spinning out, right? Like every great performance has got to have some amount of resilience.
Yeah. Yeah. I think yeah, people it's great to put in a lot of thought and energy into the science of all of it for sure, because when it all comes together and when you've mastered it and when it magically happens the way you want and the machine's running the way it should, wow, is it beautiful.
Yeah.
But don't be so obsessed and committed to that side of it, the quantitative side, that you don't put any energy into the other side of
Mm-hmm.
how do I because and that's the mind component. If you don't put the effort into the how do I build myself up in a way that I can handle the challenge because I've put all my effort into this pursuit of perfection, you really do yourself a disservice, because then you can't handle any upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you see that actually, I think, in a lot of great runners. Combine that with someone who's talented and has an ego and wants to take first place at whatever. This is the phenomenon, I would argue, of I'm going to drop out the minute I'm not in first place in a race. And
Mm-hmm.
and you see that all over the place.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like the pursuit of actual absolute perfection mixed with ego means I'm going to drop the minute second place passes me. I always think
Yeah.
that's a little bit funny. So, yeah.
Uh, well, Jared, that's an amazing reminder of what a powerful organ our brain is for runners and how much our mind really can lead us to do amazing things or not. I think there's no better person in the world to really have this conversation with than you, because I think some of the things you've accomplished with Barkley and just, your long history, this is something that is clearly your expertise, and it's led to results that have made you an amazing climber, an amazing endurance runner, and an amazing businessman, race director, engineer. Maybe as kind of a final thought, tell us what's your next race and what's going on.
Well, my next race, and I'm not doing a ton of races these days. Actually, my wife is uh she's I don't know, more of the organized runner than I am these days, and it's really fun because I have two daughters. It's so great for them to see their mother do things. So a lot of effort into supporting her. She's going to run the Wasatch 100 in September,
Awesome.
and she's done a bunch of cool races leading up to that. So that's where most of my you know, mind goes. That said, I always
Yeah.
have to have something to keep me motivated. Motivated. I'm going to do the High Five race. It's out in southwestern Colorado in the San Juans. Most people probably haven't heard of it. I tend to like races people haven't heard of.
Okay. How much vert?
It's
How
40
long and how
something.
much? 40
I think it's
something.
100-ish miles. It's a cool
Yeah.
race. Super quiet.
Mm,
No entry fee, and it's like a backcountry survival kind of race. I would say it's like a Nolan's 14, actually,
mm.
in the sense that it's got a start point, an end point, and spots along the way, summits. The five is in reference to the 514ers that it touches, and there's a bunch of ridges and slightly lower 13,000 foot peaks. But I'm excited about it. It's going to be a good adventure. That's coming up in I
No
think
big
3
deal.
weeks.
No big deal. I mean, you're mostly focused on your wife right now and the Wasatch 100, but
Yeah.
no big deal. Just go rip a 100 miler with 40K avert, along the
Well,
way.
and it's not going to be
Side note,
pretty, actually.
footnote. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to pull out all the tips and techniques we've been talking about here because it's gonna be an adventure for me for sure. But I'm excited. I've wanted to do it for years. Um, it's always interesting to me, big races. It seems like the harder it is to get into something, the human nature is the more I want to do it if I can't have it. That's
Mhm.
hard rock to a T. And for years I've been like, I know it's like impossible to get into the race these days, but go do go do Nolan's or go do something. There's all these other cool things. And so I've always looked at this race, the High Five, and wanted to do it. And so finally going to go out there this year. Um,
Awesome.
doing that. I guess outside of that, I've been trying to apply some of these principles of not having fear and pursuing things for the right reasons to my life too. You and I worked together as engineers at a company and that I was at for many years, and I've made a
Hmm.
big pivot there. So a lot of my time and attention's been going to this career change that I have made.
Yeah.
Very exciting, actually. And if we have more time, I would dive into that. But I actually think it's into a neat space, the venture capital space, where um, I've just learned that it's actually really aligned with how my mind thinks and everything we just talked about because it's big dreaming, big risk taking, insane levels of commitment needed to pull off what most fail at. Nine out of 10 or probably a higher ratio fail in this space. Um, and so the minds of the entrepreneurs that I'm now working to find and support and help them get off the ground and start what they're trying to do is really fun for me. And it's
Yeah.
in a space that matters a lot with like environmental and climate technologies, but I'm like super inspired. And so it's sort of like a lot of the things I love about endurance stuff, but in the professional sense. And so my professional heart is sort of beating similarly to the way my heartbeat in like as a runner or a climber or something. I'm like really like motivated and inspired right now. But big change I made about 4 months ago, and I'm just loving it.
Yeah. Congratulations on that. Jared Campbell's the next, not the next, but the I'm going to call you the best VC out, just based on, um, your mentality. And it's kind of this attitude of like, let's do it. Like, let's go try that. Right. Let's go build something that has never been built before. What's the worst that could happen? Right. Like, oh, okay, we
Right.
lose some money maybe or something. Right. Like,
Yeah.
but it's this attitude of like, let's go try it. Right. And
Yep.
I think that's going to make you amazingly successful in that new
Well,
position that
thanks.
you're in. So congratulations on that. You got me fired up. I have a buddy who wants me to go run 20 miles with him tomorrow morning, and he wants to start at 4:30. Okay. And I am not a morning guy, but after this conversation, you know what? I'm going to be like, I'm going to set that alarm for 4:00.
Do it, buddy.
And it's going to hurt when that alarm goes off. And I'm going to say to myself, like, this is good. Like, I like this. This is
good.
This is
Yeah,
painful.
training,
I need this. This is great training. Jared would love this. I love it. So Thad, if you're listening, I'm coming at 4:30 tomorrow. So yeah, this has got me fired up. And I do think this stuff matters. Like just accepting the times when it's rough. And yeah, so amazing thoughts. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule, Jared. And yeah, any last final pieces of advice for people listening?
Well, I got a fun book. Maybe I was recently with one of the entrepreneurs that I'm involved with now. Amazing person. He's an athlete, but he's a business person too, for sure. And he recommended a book called "How Bad Do You Want It?"
Mm,
Um, and it's awesome. I actually jumped into this space talking about some of the running stuff I've been doing, and to see the parallels is amazing. So there's a really good book for you. I think it lays out really beautifully uh, a lot of the concepts we've been talking about here. So check that
awesome.
book out.
Yeah. I'll try to put that in the description on the podcast and on our YouTube description so that people can just, wherever they're listening or watching, they can just click and check that out. Book recommendation from Jared. That's amazing. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thanks so much for listening, everybody. If you listened to this conversation and you found it helpful to you, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. You can write us at info@tracerfitness.com. And we do read those and we do respond. So if you have a request of somebody that you'd love to have on the podcast, if it's a topic that you'd love to have covered, please let us know. If you don't mind, if you enjoy this, please do all of the typical stuff on social media that helps us out. Like, subscribe, comment, share, all of that stuff. Tell your friends, pass it along. But I think the conversation speaks for itself, and Jared's advice speaks for itself, and it's content worth sharing. So thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot, Jared.
Thanks, Joey. See ya.